Hi, everyone. Welcome back to the Legal Zone. I'm your host, Regina Campbell, and this Legal Zone is brought to you by the Campbell Law Group. I want to remind everyone that, well, by the way, this is also a season 2, episode 7. This is Miami Tech through the business lens. Just want to take a brief moment to remind everyone who our prior speaker was Mr. Thomas Scalaro, which he was able to provide us with some business tips for business owners on how to avoid being sued by plaintiffs' firms like Mr. Scalaro's. And he was very helpful and also gave us an understanding of the importance of being responsible and having social responsibility as we do business owners as well, and helping the community out through safety measures, treating our employees right. It was very, very informative. So if you missed it, by all means, go back and you can look on our YouTube channel or podcast channel, and by all means, look at it. It's a very good episode. So today I want to shift topics, and we're going to talk a little bit about Miami Tech and through a business lens. And I have 2 great speakers today. So I want to start to introduce them. I have Mrs. Joycelyn Brown. She is our first speaker. She's the managing attorney at the Miami-based international property law firm called IPS Legal Group P.A. After receiving her bachelor's from science from Texas A&M, Ms. Brown worked as an engineer in the semiconductor industry for several years. She also received her law degree from University of Miami in 2008. Following law school, Mrs. Brown worked as an associate at one of the Florida's most respected contract disputes firms, where she represented companies in various matters, including intellectual property, contract dispute, complex litigation, and employment matters. Aside from the practice of law, Mrs. Brown has served as the Miami-Dade community as president of the Wilkins D. Ferguson J. Bar Association, as a member of the Dade County Bar Association, and also she has been selected and recognized as the top 40 under 40 Black professionals in Miami. Mrs. Brown is also an adjunct professor for the University of Miami Law School, where she teaches startups and entrepreneurship. Correct? That's right. Oh, no.
That's correct.
Yes, very nice. So I also want to bring you to Mrs. Leigh-Ann Buchanan. She's our second guest. She's the president of, I hope I'm saying this right, Aire Ventures. Or is it Aire? Okay. Okay. A social impact facilitator and sought after strategic advisor who helps leaders develop ready strategies that leverage tech, innovation, and social design to accelerate organizational and community change. She has also developed content and solutions for public and private sector leaders, including Google, Facebook, Delta, P&G Ventures, Aire A&B, B&B. My goodness, today my just tongue twisting today. HSBC and UBC. Mrs. Leigh-Ann is the founder of NIA. Did I say that right? No?
NIA Project.
NIA Project, okay. As well as Aire Ventures. She has raised over $4.5 million in equity-free capital to help fund some of these projects and other projects as well. Her insights and contributions have been featured in the New York Times, also magazine, Inc. magazine, NPR, Bloomberg, American Psychological Association, ABA Law, and more. I want to welcome my 2 guests that have amazing background and bios. I think they're going to be such an added a bonus for everyone to help them understand Miami Tech, which has been in the news quite a bit. Do you guys agree? Yes. Okay.
Absolutely. I think that you would be living under a rock if you hadn't heard the term Miami Tech over the last 2 years or so.
Yes, absolutely. I mean, it's just been such an explosion. We've just, I'm hearing from the housing markets to employees to hedge funds coming here, and it's all about supporting the Miami Tech industry and building it here. Some want to call it the next Silicon Valley. Well, we'll see, So I want to talk to you guys a little bit about what is the secret ingredient for a city to become a tech mecca.
Leigh-Ann, do you want to take that first? Because I know that you have, so Leigh-Ann and I, we've been on panels before discussing this very same topic. And Leigh-Ann has a different insight than I do. So I think, Leigh-Ann, you start, and then I'll piggyback with my take as far as the resources that it takes as well.
Awesome. Well, thanks, Regina, for having me. And of course, it's great to be here with a friend. Joyce and I are law school buddies. We've served in the bar association together, so it's always a pleasant surprise. So what I would say when we think about what does it take to become a thriving tech ecosystem, there's a lot of factors we need to think about. The way that I break it down is I like to think about an ecosystem in terms of culture, strategy, and assets. And so when you think about culture, things like clear definitions of what our values are. Project that I worked on is the Miami Tech Manifesto, which was a group of leaders who'd spent a lot of time building in our ecosystem to clearly articulate what is Miami Tech about? Inclusion, access, equity, making sure that when we're building a tech ecosystem, we're not displacing people, that we're keeping things like affordability in mind. And we're understanding that tech is not just this monolith, it can be used as a tool to advance equity in a city, in a community where historically we haven't really elevated issues of equity and inclusion as much as we ought to. When it comes to strategy, I would say a thriving tech ecosystem needs to be intentional about how it's being built. So the example that I would point to is a project that I also worked on called the Ready Scorecard, which up until recently, I think was the largest assessment of a tech ecosystem through the lens of racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. And this means that we're not just saying political leaders or firms with the largest balance sheet of assets under management, you decide the fate of our community. No, we are listening to entrepreneurs at every level, from startups to small business owners in some of the communities that we overlook, to students that want to break into tech. And so really understanding where are there gaps and where are there opportunities to meaningfully invest financial, social, and other forms of capital. And then the last thing I would say is assets. We've got money in Miami. When you look at the trend of the amount of dollars that has been invested in terms of venture capital, you look at how the folks that have been moving to our community are ready to invest and have the pocketbooks that they're ready to stroke checks. We need to look at ways to be thoughtful about how we leverage the assets that exist. And so I think the project that I'd point to that I'm so excited to talk about a little bit later is something called Tech Equity Miami, which is a $100 million funders consortium that I helped to design, that our goal is to deploy $100 million over 5 years into projects and initiatives that advance equity through tech. These are not founders or startups, but actual nonprofit social impact projects that can help bridge the gap. So culture, strategy, and assets, I think, are key drivers of a thriving tech ecosystem.
Like it. Absolutely. I'm going to come back because I have some really, really, really neat things I want to talk to you about, because I think we're in a new environment that allows that conversation of inclusion, of planning, since we're starting kind of from the beginning. In Miami, so to speak, it's not an established location like New York or other cities that kind of just, they blew up on their own and they were whatever they were at the time. Right now, I think we're still in a position where we can develop it thoughtfully. Inclusion, like you're saying, affordability also is a huge problem in Miami with this. So we'll come back to that, definitely. So I'll let Mrs. Brown take a shot also.
So Leigh-Ann is 100% correct. But I would also add that, when it comes to any startup, but particularly tech startups, a tech startup is designed to do one of three things. It's either going to collaborate within the industry and within the supply chain, it's going to compete, or it's going to disrupt. One of the things that will really allow for Miami's tech ecosystem to grow and to boom is if we assist with the development of more tech disruptors, right? And a tech disruptor will literally just pop up anywhere. And what's really great about them is that it's really innovative. You're not just doing the same thing a different way. You're doing a completely new thing in ways that no one ever even imagined. So from my perspective, and in addition to the funding organizations, as well as the talent, right, that Leigh-Ann was touching on, you need really novel ideas and inventions. You also need to make sure that there are different companies at various stages of growth so that the ecosystem can continue to grow. And then we need to make sure that we're attracting the talent, which comes into like the affordability of living in Miami, right? We need to be able to attract the necessary talent so those entrepreneurs are able to stay and really build a community here, not only with each other, just from a professional and business standpoint, but also build their personal community so that they can stay and allow and show other innovators and other entrepreneurs and other startups that not only can you build a business here, but you can stay and continue to give to the environment. But then also, in addition, I think we need mentors. We need more advisors. I think all of those things is really what makes a startup ecosystem grow. So to talk about it kind of like full circle, we need corporations that support other supporting organizations, funding organizations, research organizations, service providers such as law firms, other support systems such as universities that have those programs in place to really help certain startups launch, particularly tech startups launch. But then also different people from interrelated organizations that can all feed into the ecosystem so that it remains sustainable.
You know, you guys bring up amazing points. I don't think I could have picked better speakers. Honestly, you really have your finger on understanding not just what Tech Mecca can be or Miami becoming it, but I think you're really incorporating this world's concept of not novelty, creating that perpetuating of entrepreneurship, the disruptor idea. We don't want to just create another Google per se. Right? You want to create things that will either disrupt it or add value somewhere else, whether it's with Google or against it or whatever it might be. You need a new flavor, not just a new generation, but a new backbone to start creating that. And it seems like Miami is in the perfect spot for that. Not only from a cultural point of view and employment and sort of a new city is developing, new opportunities. It just has, you have the Latin American also sort of entrance here that you can bring in talent from that direction. You have a new system, an ecosystem. I think that was so perfect, Leigh-Ann. Seriously, I love that word. Ecosystem that's developing here in Florida. So the traditional things that are needed for Tech Mecca, do you think Miami's getting there? Because I'm listening, I'm really excited with what you guys are saying. And the fact that you've gone down into that level of distinction that we do need to bring and incorporate different people, different talents, not just in the tech industry, but the supporting staff that might be needed to develop a tech industry. But what does that look like here? We already have a political sort of system, dynamics, cultural, all going on in Miami. So how does Miami specifically get there to what you guys are referring to? Like, creating those supporting staff, not just from a funding. How do we get alternative funding also, or other companies that are willing to invest in the diversity, change the model, change the sort of like the typical structure? Do we have that here?
I would say that we're already there. I think that, as Leigh-Ann had mentioned, like over the past 2 years, there's been it's almost all eyes on Miami. There's been tremendous growth within the tech sector at the University of Miami School of Law. There is a startup clinic, and that startup clinic, and the course that I teach, which is startup law and entrepreneurship, feeds into the startup clinic. And the purpose is to prepare new lawyers that are going to be graduating and entering into the workforce, prepare them to support startups, prepare them to deal with mergers and acquisitions. One of the things that a lot of these tech startups want to do, they want to scale, they want to grow, and they want to find an exit strategy. Oftentimes that exit strategy involves a merger or an acquisition. And so being able to playing my role in educating this new wave of lawyers entering into the market to help continue to support it, I think it's really key. But again, I think that we're already there. I think that we're going to continue to grow. We're going to continue to expand, and we're going to continue to see, just generally speaking, the Miami ecosystem, right? The Miami's environment, whether or not it be the social infrastructure, the political infrastructure, the building like resources and housing infrastructure. We're going to see that continue to grow and expand to further and fully support the growth that we're seeing within tech.
And that brings to mention maybe Leigh-Ann also, and I'm going to give you a chance to answer. As a business lawyer, I see businesses from all different stages, startups all the way to they're slightly growing, they're getting up that curve, they're starting to have capital problem, different things come in. Should I bring in a partner? How much do I give away? They want to take half my company, all these kinds of stuff. So I'm always, especially when I have a startup come in, I'm like, I want you to remember what I say. We're going to start here. But if you reach this growth level, or you're reaching a little bit of roadblocks, or you have to restructure things a certain way and you're going to learn on a growth curve, I want you to reach out to alternative ways of doing this. It's not just give half your company away to somebody else that will come in with capital. Look at a vision. Look at where you want to go with it. Like we were talking about exit strategies. Some of them it's fuzzy to them. Some are not. They're not exactly sure what they want. They don't understand how to create that capital structure that allows flexibility for venture capitals to come in without also letting go potentially as they're growing of that vision that they had. That's always a trick in tech, right? So Leigh-Ann, talk to me. How do you bridge that, like what Joycelyn is saying, basically with capital and like not just the traditional sources from hedge funds, but like you were talking, you're building a fund that helps, startups have this, but it also allows for additional inclusion and diversity to grow here.
Yeah, I think that's a good question. And I agree, and Joyce knows this. I agree with Joyce in part, and then maybe I disagree with Joyce in part. What I would say is we're there, but we have room to grow. So I completely agree that like we've reached a milestone. But I think sometimes when we look at tech ecosystems, we look at it from the vantage point of just a snapshot in time, rather than seeing them as this organic, constantly evolving kind of experience where there are different stages, right? And so when you ask this question, Regina, I think when I started in the tech ecosystem like 7+ years ago, we were at a different space. I launched the Venture Cafe. The needs were around convening and connecting and really just getting resources out there. Yeah. Now, we are at a space where we've got a critical mass. Joyce is absolutely right. We've got companies. We need more disruptive companies. You're right. We need more capital. I would say capital for whom and by whom. And that is an important, footnote that I want to put in there. Yeah. But the needs of our ecosystem are a little bit different in this kind of upward trajectory of maturing stage. And so what we're missing are a little bit more nuanced intervention. Before, we needed kind of like these broad strokes, convening, we needed clinics, we needed law schools involved, we needed more service professionals, we needed more startups. But now we're beginning to see that we have angel investors, we have funds here, but we need to look and peel back the layer to see who is getting access to that financial capital. When we look at some of the data from the Ready scorecard, we saw that 30% of the community that responded, and that was a statistically significant part of our community actually responded. We got 1,400 individual data points. 30% said capital and funding was the number one priority. And then when you compare that to the fact that of respondents, 41% of Black respondents rated the ecosystem as having a negative impact on their entrepreneurial experience. And over 20% of women said they lacked access to resources. Then the question becomes, when we talk about the supports that are needed, they need to be specific for certain groups that are underrepresented. And when we take a broad strokes view of our ecosystem. And so I guess to answer the question, I would say a couple things. One, we need to be nuanced in how we look at kind of matching resources to particular groups. Second, in terms of opportunities for investment, we need to focus on niche areas of talent. We've got a ton of young talent. We've got over 300,000 college students. The FIU School of Computing, which just received, I think it was like $20 million investment from Knight Foundation. They have already begun to increase in size. They're looking to expand 4x in the number of students that they serve. But what we're missing in our ecosystem is senior level tech talent in data, machine learning, product growth, and software engineering. And those are some of the needs of the full trajectory of these elements of our ecosystem that we need to look at. And so instead of saying talent, we got to say talent at what stage? Instead of saying capital, we have to say capital at what stage and for whom. Yes, we have a lot more angel investors. We're still missing Series B and some of those larger rounds. And when we see some of these kind of outliers, I think MoonPay had I think they're like over $500 million like Series A. That is not representative of the experience of all founders. And so I think when we talk about the tech ecosystem, we need to stop talking about it in terms of a monolith and get nuanced and specific so that we don't lose sight of certain groups that are not getting the same representation and access to resources as other people.
So I don't know if it's a question of information or just not actually accessible. People are not lending them the money, or people just not seeing them. You know, are they not hearing about these projects and these other companies?
Joyce, you go first. I can see you. I know your looks. You jump in on that one first.
Go ahead.
So this is what I'll say. This issue is not new to Miami. And this is something that has gone on for a very long time, right? It's very easy for someone in a position of power, regardless of what they look like and who they are. It's very easy for them to say, hey, you know what? I want to elevate someone, but I'm going to elevate someone who looks like me. I'm going to elevate someone who has the same experience as me. I'm going to elevate someone who I see on the golf course on a regular basis, right? So a lot of it is for the people who have the resources. A lot of it is expanding beyond their known circle and recognizing that diversity, equity, and inclusion. That's the key, like in the inclusion aspect, right? That they need to make an effort to reach out beyond themselves, to network and get involved in areas that they normally wouldn't, right? I would say that's point one. Yeah. Point two is, as it relates to those who would be receiving the funds, they're there. They know where the funds are. They're going out and they're seeking the funds. Now, sometimes to an extent, and I think Leigh-Ann can expand on this a little bit more in more detail, a lot of times you don't know what you don't know. So if you're already starting at a disadvantaged point, right? Yeah. If you're already starting from a vantage point where you can see the cliff, but you can't see what's on the other side of it, it's difficult. It's difficult to climb and it's difficult to get there without someone saying, oh, wait, I see you there. Let me see if I can give you the resources. So some of the organizations that Leigh-Ann mentioned bridge that gap, or they're helping to bridge that gap, but we need more. We need more eyes on the issue, more eyes on the problem, just a more spread of that knowledge. So I'll pause there, and Leigh-Ann, I'll let you jump in and take that one home.
So I definitely amplify everything that Joyce said. Like in terms of access to financial capital specifically, it's always a function of trust and access. And so who do you have breakfast, lunch, and dinner with? That is who you do business with. And if you don't have breakfast and lunch and dinner with the people that are outside your circle, then they're not going to get access to those opportunities and the dollars. And I think the second thing that's really important to underscore is knowledge does not equal experience, nor does it equal judgment. I think sometimes we unfortunately conflate knowledge and the availability of information with the judgment, the experience, and the ability to strategically leverage that information. And so we sometimes have difficulty designing programs to fill the experience and judgment gaps. And we just say, okay, like this is how you raise a round. But no. How do you actually develop the relationships, understand who in your network can review your pitch deck, figure out strategically how to get access to some of these programs? Just because, I coach kids on how to get into college, just because you put an application in doesn't mean you're getting to college, and it doesn't mean you're getting scholarships. I think the same thing exists for a lot of the resources that are available to startups and founders. And to Joyce's point, if you've been historically disadvantaged, you're missing out on substantial experience and judgment gaps that just come from being around these spaces to know how to utilize them.
Let me piggyback on that just really quickly. And so one of the things that I tell individuals that I mentor is that, number one, and we've heard this all before, your network is your net worth. Right. Yeah. But a lot of times when people go into these environments, they don't network because network is work. they net socialize.
Yes, yeah.
They net socialize. They go into a space and they find people that look like them, find people that they believe that they have some sort of like equal footing with, and they strike up exactly. They strike up those conversations. No, you need to work, interject yourself into a conversation, meet someone new, invite someone that you normally wouldn't invite to lunch or a dinner or, a cup of coffee, what have you. But to Leigh-Ann's point, a lot of it really is about stepping out, and it's stepping outside of your comfort zone on both sides, but stepping outside of your comfort zone, gaining the knowledge, and then putting in the work.
I agree. And that kind of lends us back to what we're talking about a little bit on the employment side. I think not only is it you do have to step outside your network because you're never going to go to another level. You're never going to go through another level or another sort of resources or other people, like you're saying. You won't get to the people that might be able to hear these ideas and do something with them. So it's hard to break in, but I also think what we're talking about, there might be a lack of knowledge, the senior level knowledge, not just on the investment side, but the tech side that helps put these packages together for angel investors, for venture capitalists, for the Miami sort of, companies that don't know how to accomplish that, right? They don't have that experience. They weren't in Silicon Valley and were part of a bunch of startups and knew where they hit a wall on their pitch or what kind of financials they want to see. They want to see compliance. They want to see, not only do investors want to see that there's a great idea and a vision, but they want to see you have the package, that you have this, the corporate structure, laws, everything together. You understand all the moving parts of it, whether you're going to go, raise capital, whether you're subject to privacy laws, certain other type of law. They want to understand, they want to see you have everything. And I think, do you think that there is still some missing that here, that guidance for that senior level employees that can bring that, not just from an engineering point of view and computer software and so forth, but also from an investment point of view? They don't have people that completely speak that language. And so they're not also talking to them either.
I think that's changing. I would say pre-pandemic, yes. Post-pandemic, in terms of the influx of really experienced firms and talent that just came from Silicon Valley and New York, I really think that's changing. Before, our biggest challenge is we hadn't experienced kind of a critical mass of liquidity events that spit out the kind of people that had gone through the scale up and exit of a company and then created more, millionaires who would be angel investors that take that knowledge and really invest back. Now we're seeing exits. So we're seeing some of our local homegrown talent exit or get to that higher level of growth. Like I think about, Andrew Parker at Papa. We recently saw kind of WinCode exit to BrainStation or get acquired. We've seen some companies where we've got, homegrown talent that can now invest that knowledge back in. I think the challenge is that these things take time, right? Just because, it's 2022, almost 2023, but it's only been not even a full 2 years since we saw a lot of new talent, experienced advisors enter into the market. And remember, they entered the market in the middle of a pandemic. And so there wasn't as much networking going on so that knowledge transfer and relationship development can actually take place. And so I think we need to give it a little bit of time. But I also think that in addition to time, there are curated ways where we can access that brain trust. There's groups like Upstream that are starting some of their programs that are about getting seasoned founders and investors to share their knowledge. And so we're seeing kind of things like the Miami Hack Week, where you have these hack houses with really sophisticated software engineers mentoring and working with teams. But I just think we need to give it a little bit of time and then really double down on some of those programs that are maybe less formal, but really substantive in how they help facilitate knowledge transfer.
Well, I think that happened even in Silicon Valley and other mecca, sort of tech meccas that they've developed, where we least expected. It was actually organically that a lot of this just started to develop, right, through informal, sometimes, meetings and meetups and talking to each other. And I think you're right. I think the pandemic, the end of this and going back to networking will help more. It's so funny you said that we need to give it more time. It feels like so much time has passed because so much has changed in Miami in 2 years, right? So it just seems like we just whoop, we hit a button and we were there. You know what I mean? I think we forget it does take time to develop that ecosystem, like you're saying, and the various layers and the complexity that goes along with that. You need governments, you need public, also agencies and organizations to kind of catch up with that as well, to support the rest of the ecosystem. So where do you think we are? I'm going to ask Joycelyn first. Where do you think we are? You think we're 50% of the way there? 60? What do you think? Or you had to give it a percentage?
From the context of where are we from a fully functioning growing tech mecca, or where are we from the context of just from the supporting human resources aspect?
Full tech mecca. So because I tell you the employment aspect is part of it, right?
So
is an aspect.
I would say that we're well beyond 50% there. I wouldn't say that we are 100% there, because we're never going to be 100% there, because the whole point of having a tech mecca is it's always something that's going to be growing and evolving. There's always going to be, there's always going to be something that's more innovative. There's always going to be a new role or a new support group that's needed in order to force the growth. So I wouldn't say that we're ever going to be quote unquote 100% there. But with what we've seen, with what's transpired over the past 2 years, with what we've seen, with the national coverage that Miami has received, with the influx of companies and hedge funds and venture capitalists and these growing startups, I would say that we're really close. I don't want to put a number on it, because I feel like it's something that's always going to grow.
That's why I'm smiling, because I was like, see, put a number on that, because I know I'm going to get a different answer.
I'm not going to put a number on it. But I would say that just from my vantage point, and just based on the work that I do with startups and what I see, day in and day out, not necessarily from the funding and support aspect that Leigh-Ann may see, or maybe even from like the more nuanced conversations and involvement that Leigh-Ann may have, from a more like holistic, more broader scope. I would think, and I think Leigh-Ann and I would disagree here, I think that we're a lot closer than Leigh-Ann may think, but that's just me.
I am not a pessimist, contrary to popular belief. Here's what I say.
Yeah.
And this is probably the lawyer in me, is like, how do you define a tech mecca? Because that, like, if we are not defining what a tech mecca is, then all of us are going to say yes 100%. Because from Joyce's perspective, like, she's dealing with startups. And when you see that critical mass, you see companies coming in, you see them raising, for her, that might be the indicator of we've arrived. Regina, as a lawyer, you're probably saying, okay, I'm getting a ton of clients. They're all tech. This is a tech mecca. I would say I'm an ecosystem architect. And so for me, I would think differently about what the indicators are for a tech mecca. My bias, and I'm always like happy to admit this, my bias is READY, racial equity, diversity, and inclusion. And so for me, the indicators of a successful tech mecca are biased by my READY lens. And so until I see more equity in some of the key elements of an ecosystem in terms of talent, venture growth, and the way in which capital is deployed, I'd say, like, we've got a critical mass, but it doesn't benefit everybody. But I definitely think that Miami is well positioned by many objective standards when we look at, the number of press mentions, the amount of firms moving here, the rate of growth. We've improved in terms of our rate of sustainability of ventures. By many standards, if you look at like the Startup Genome Report, we are a tech mecca. I agree with you, Joyce. The question is, now that we have a tech mecca, what are we going to do with it?
Yeah. I guess the way I kind of see it in my mind, and again, you can see it different ways, from a legal point of view, from social. I think almost every major city, whether you're tech mecca or not, has a lot of growth to do in terms of inclusion and diversity. Because ultimately, that's a question of, are you judged on your talent and ability, and the color of your skin or who you know doesn't matter anymore. That's a hard thing to get to. I'm saying who you know, where you come from. Like Joyce was pointing out earlier, sometimes you'd rather invest in someone that looks like you. You feel more comfortable. You saw them at the country club. Hopefully, and some of that's just human nature also. I mean, I hate to say this, but sometimes I think the back of my head, that song, High School Never Ends. Because sometimes we just stick with what we know in our little groups and our little, I go to network and I'm actually don't come across as shy, but I'm actually very shy. It's actually very hard to break into another conversation, or everyone's in their little group and they know each other and they, and it's kind of hard to just, you walk in, but sometimes you don't shine that way. People don't get to know you. They don't understand you. So I think from an inclusion point of view, we all, there's always that. And I think every country has an issue with that also, including outsiders into, to the main fabric of society, so to speak. Right. But Tech Mecca, I guess I'm thinking in my head, it's Silicon Valley. When we can call ourselves Miami, and everyone just knows we're the tech mecca, so to speak. To me, it arrives on a global level. It's sort of more of a marketing thing in my head rather than a legal, because I definitely see the difference. Such a difference in employment, the employees that are coming, senior level, corporations, everybody to come support it all, Miami. That's why I was so excited to have this panel. And I think we're more than 50% of the way. There's no question. But it's just interesting. I think we can go very far. And Joyce, I think you're right. At the end of the day, Tech Mecca is, hopefully we stay that way, because some cities can lose it if you don't have that evolutionary power, that growth, that continuation of learning, keeping it new, fresh, because you can reach a maturity level in terms of bringing in capital, employees, and have the infrastructure and all this good stuff in the product you create. But if you don't keep it fresh, technology will definitely leave you behind, right? So, my thoughts too. I have like that little bit of that sort of in my head, like when people just, because Silicon Valley, why is it on the map? Because it became a tech mecca. It became where you go to create, these companies, and a lot of where their headquarters were at and so forth. But I think Miami also has a real special spice to it. So a special sort of feeling to it as well. So I have such hopes that it's going to be something on its own.
Well, let me just comment really quickly, Regina, because if that is so, I guess, so to Leigh-Ann's point, and I would say then Leigh-Ann, you're 100% right. It comes down, how do you define tech mecca? By your definition, Regina, the Miami is a tech mecca. But by Leigh-Ann's definition, we definitely are not. If you were to compare Silicon Valley from where it was, how it grew, and even where it is now, it does not have the ready bias that Leigh-Ann was sharing. So from Leigh-Ann's point of view, even Silicon Valley would not be a true tech mecca. The only reason that we view it as such is just the longevity, right? It has that history. It's been there from inception. We're talking about, the birthplace of wafers and semiconductor manufacturing and computer chips and so on and so forth.
But from a human point of view, the way we like to see an overall ecosystem that's fair, absolutely not. I don't know if any city has. I'm going to send out a survey on this, and I'm on these 2 questions.
Okay.
I'm going to see what people come back, and I'll post the results, because I think that's really interesting. At the end of the day, I think a tech mecca should be, when it all comes together, inclusiveness, readiness, everything, capital, genuine ideas, amazing thoughts. I love to see growth. I love to see ideas and put into place, and people kind of, I like this. Now let's try this. And they learn. I love that. You know what I mean? But I think Leigh-Ann is right. I think ultimately that is what a tech mecca should be, when it has everything, all the components together.
Well, I think one thing that I would share, and I definitely invite folks to check out the Ready scorecard report, is that by and large, even though we have gaps to fill in so many areas, many of the folks involved in the ecosystem, indicated that they have confidence in our leaders, our public officials, that they care about tech. Now, maybe they need some support, more public metrics. And by and large, people believe that we're doing our best. And so I think it's kind of zooming out. I think it's like, yes, we may not be a tech mecca by different standards, but we're in this thing and we're working towards it. And so I think the key is making sure we communicate the standards by which we're going to hold ourselves accountable and the standards by which we're going to measure growth. And sometimes we like to think about the destination versus the journey and how far we've progressed. And I know, Joyce, we've been at this for a while. You remember in the early days of, Venture Cafe, and even before that, we've come a long way. Knight Foundation has put, I think, close to $50 million into building our ecosystem. I remember when the first co-working space opened up. And so beginning to see milestones of progress, I think, is a more realistic and helpful lens to think about our community.
Yeah.
I like that.
Let me put it in, I'll put it in perspective, okay? I became a registered patent attorney in 2010, okay? So 2010, I took and passed the patent bar. I had a mentor, a non-patent mentor, a non-patent attorney mentor, but at the time there was not a single female registered patent attorney that I could connect with. Okay.
Oh.
When I was going through the process of studying for the patent bar, I had older males say, "Why would you do that? There's no work for that here." And I dug my heels and I was like, no, there are companies that are here. People still need patent attorneys. You can't just go to one of two law firms, right? There's an opportunity for growth. And I dug my heels in and I did it. And there was an opportunity. And when I launched my law firm as a remote practice. People thought I was crazy. People looked at me like I had three heads because we didn't have the ecosystem at the time to support it. So Leigh-Ann, like for sure, I have seen the growth, the co-working spaces, the WeWorks, the CICs, just the spaces, having everything grow and evolve. It's been amazing. And it's also an opportunity to say, "Yeah, I told you so."
Yeah, exactly. Well, I say when they say you can't go, you cannot pass, I say, watch me. I'll build the road to myself.
Yep.
Because if I think I should be able to go there and I want to go there, who are you to tell me that I can't?
Mm-hmm.
I've always had that mindset. I'll build a path. Same way. Watch me. So I'm really happy. This has been fantastic. And we've gotten so much information also about where some entrepreneurs can go. Gives an idea for the community to feel also. I think that happiness that we do feel like, yay, we're going, we're doing well. And it gives a lot of resources people can understand. This is the sort of feeling, the pulse of what's going on here. And we're in the right direction, and to keep pushing. Don't give up. And there is funding out there, and it is coming here. So I definitely want to, post some of your foundations and Ready Scorecard, maybe links to it so people can go through and different community stuff that you mentioned, Leigh-Ann, so they know where to go. And hopefully, if anyone ever sees, I think I can say this for all three of you because you seem very friendly and very open to want to help people. If anyone ever sees any three of us in a social event, please come up to us and say, "I'm just as shy as you. Can you talk to me?" Can we plow that new road together? Because it is hard. It's hard, So I want to thank you guys for coming on. Do you have any last words for Miami or, any suggestions for businesses here?
I'm feeling a bit nostalgic because of Joyce's story about being a futurist and seeing ahead of the curve. And I remember when I left my firm and they're like, "What's an incubator?" And like, "Why are you going to this tech thing? Like, what are you building?" And so I think the last word that I have is sometimes as lawyers, we have this singular identity that our job is only to represent clients, kind of help them advance their business interests. And I admittedly, when I moved into tech, I didn't see a place in the tech ecosystem for someone like me. Like, I was a travel lawyer. Like, this is not for me. But and I'll share this a link to this post. But I think that because an ecosystem is so amorphous, there's so many different roles for people to play. And you do not need to just be the service provider. There's a role for you if you're like a strategy mind like me and you want to think about infrastructure of supports and architecture, like you can do that. If you're an amazing kind of marketer, I'd say Francis Suarez is like our best ambassador. You can be an ambassador for tech. I think about Jarrett Davis. He's a great legal lawyer ambassador for the tech ecosystem who saw this way ahead of everybody. And so what I would say is just trial and error. Find where you can fit in most comfortably in the tech space and understand that there is different roles for people to play, so that you can not feel like tech is over here and I'm over here. The ecosystem will only grow when everybody is invested and truly feels like they are a part of it and that they belong.
I agree. And I think people miss, like, that's the thing about tech and entrepreneurship. Some of those roles develop over time. You actually create the role, or you create the need gets created and you fill it out of your creativity, out of your observing these things, and the pattern of the market and the ecosystem. You know what? They don't do this. Someone doesn't have this experience and this I do. I can probably help bridge a gap. You'll be surprised, So I want to thank you guys. This has been a great panel. So exciting. Yes. So I'm going to try to see if we can get back together again in about another year, and then we'll see where our metrics, where we were again, and then where we are. So, and I'm going to post a survey on two of the questions out there. People think we are a Mecca at this point, Miami, and also maybe a couple of questions on, I'm going to think about how to divide it up. Like, how do you define a Mecca? If it does include ready, if it does include inclusion, and where we think we are here. So it'd be interesting. Yes.
Well, thank you so much for having us, Regina. It's definitely been a pleasure. Leigh-Ann, as always, it's great to see you.
Likewise. Thank you so much. This has been great.
Wonderful. So I want to thank all our guests also for tuning in. If you didn't get a chance to see the full podcast, you can see it on YouTube. We will post it on our also podcast channels. And we hope everyone enjoyed this show and this episode. And please remember to follow us on social media and become subscribers so you can see some of our new other podcasts as well. Want to wish everyone the best. And I hope everyone is, at least other people that are dealing with with the Hurricane Ian, are doing as best as they can. Again, there are lots of resources out there. I hope it doesn't look impossible. Reach out to your bar associations, to your local communities, to other counties. And I hope everyone's well as can be. And everyone stay safe. Okay. Thank you and take care. Bye. Thank you so much.
Bye.
Bye.